Harrison Price for Friday, April 18th. Good Friday, 2025. Coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee, here at the historic Wall Center. And this program, a presentation of Bet365. Matt Sakaris alongside Gaffar, sitting in for Blake Price today. Four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson, hitting switches and conducting things. Welcome. Nice to see you. How are you?
Well, how are you?
Get your mic fixed there.
Well, how are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. The day where the Vancouver Canucks meet the media and head off into their summer. This is a day, sadly, that we have been accustomed to holding in April, as opposed to May. Last year was nice, a nice change, right, to do it last year in May, but back to April in advance of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And the players and head coach Rick Tocchet did meet the media today. Bit of a different schedule than what we had seen in years past. Heard earlier in the week that Tocchet would be going home to Vegas on Saturday, so he will not participate in the management year-end presser, which is coming up on Monday with Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin. We're here to unpack everything we heard today from Rick Tocchet, Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes, Brock Besser, Thatcher Demco, and others, but we will start with our Surrey Mitsubishi poll question, Irf. Do you believe Elias Pettersson will make the necessary changes to become the player and leader the Canucks want him to be? You can vote yes, you can vote no. Do so at the Harrison Price X and YouTube channels. What do you think?
It's a tough question. I think a lot of people are going to vote no, based on very recent performance and judging by what he said, which obviously you'll hear from a little bit later, and what we know kind of about maybe his relationship with Rick Tocchet or what there is. But I'm going to say he has a chance to turn it around. I'm going to go a little hybrid answer there for you, Matt. He has a chance to do it, but I think a big word we're going to in this show today is going to be used is going to be work. He's going to need to put in the work to be able to do that.
Yeah, I was hoping to hear the bright, upbeat, effervescent Elias Pettersson today. The first time we had heard from him in the better part of a month, right, since his last game around that game in March against the New York Rangers. In JT Miller, I was hoping to hear a guy who wasn't necessarily carrying the weight of the world. Basically, the guy that we heard when they came back off that road trip and he mea culpa'd on, hey, I said something dumb about the media. That Elias Pettersson, who we heard a lot from in his rookie year and early in his NHL career, and we've had snippets of in the subsequent years. That's the guy, that's the attitude that I want to hear from Elias. Today was not a convincing performance for me. There was a reluctance. I felt there was a stubbornness. I did not necessarily hear a guy who is 100% bought in with what this organization wants and needs from him. And let's face it, this organization has very high and specific requirements. When you spend as much time around Sidney Crosby as they did, these guys have a model. These guys have an example of what they want a number one centerman, franchise pillar, foundational player, centerpiece on a championship club to look like, to sound like, and most important, to prepare like. And I voted no, Irf, because I'm still skeptical that Elias can meet these bars.
Yeah, and I think another thing to add to that is you mentioned the Sidney Crosbys and Evgeny Malkins and guys that this management group has been around, and it's very plain and simple if you really look at it. This team and organization has invested nearly $100 million into this hockey player, giving him the big contract, giving him the responsibility. where is the return of investment? Where is the commitment level from you? We're not asking you to stay in Vancouver the whole summer. We're not asking you to do something completely different. Elias Pettersson mentioned that, he's got great resources in Vancouver as he does in Sweden. But the team that gave you the money, the organization, your bosses want you to stay and work a little bit longer. They want you to put into a little bit of overtime, so to speak. And if you're not willing to do that, or if it's something that you don't think that you can do or that you can accept, where is your commitment level if you're Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford from Elias Pettersson?
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. I mean, they've had their exit meeting with Elias. Needless to say, a different environment where I hope there was more candor, where I hope there was more getting down to brass tacks. But I do wonder if the last 24 hours, the exit meeting, what he said today, and in fact the next few weeks or however long Elias plans to spend here in Vancouver, I do wonder, I've been saying this for a while now, since last week when we heard Allvin mention training in Vancouver, staying back and training in Vancouver. I do wonder if this is a litmus test. I do wonder if this is the final puzzle piece for this management group in terms of making the decision on whether they want to keep him or whether they want to trade him before his no-move clause kicks in on July 1st. And look, as many have said, and we've talked to ex-players like Frank Corrado, guys like Jeff Merrick, everybody who's been on our program here for the last little while and elsewhere, that you don't trust him to go out on his own and do it out of club view, I think says something. I think that gives us an indication of the starting point or the point where Canucks management is at with this guy. I've said, go ahead.
Well, I mean, Quinn Hughes said it too.
Well, there was a very interesting answer from Quinn Hughes with regards to his role in helping Elias out on this question of becoming the player and the leader that the Vancouver Canucks want him to be. And we'll get to that clip here from the Canucks captain in a moment. The daily poll question, a presentation of Surrey Mitsubishi, which is giving you $500 off right now on a new or pre-owned vehicle. You got to mention Harrison Price. And Surrey Mitsubishi wants to remind you, bring them any offer, and they'll beat it. Score more, save more, more value, more savings. Go see our friends Daniel Arash at 13820 104th Avenue in Surrey. Top story today brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, and Foolish Winery. Canucks players and coach meet the media for their final availability. And there was a whole lot of meat on the bone here, Irf, on a number of situations and unresolved questions that they go into the summer facing. So let's start with the head coach. He came out first and alone. As mentioned, he's going home tomorrow to his residence in Vegas, and so will not be participating on Monday with Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin. The big question, of course, is does Rick Tocchet want to be back coaching the Vancouver Canucks after, let's face it, a year from hell in terms of what he had to deal with? An underperforming club. He made his fair share of mistakes. The players in his charge made their fair share. And, of course, the Elias Pettersson, JT Miller feud, which was the defining storyline of this season. J-Pat on the job, Jeff. He's not afraid to ask the tough questions, and simply ask Tocchet if he wants to be back.
Rick, is it a different dynamic at all conducting exit interviews when your future is a little unclear at this point? And you said the other night that it would be a few days, and I know that you'll negotiate and talk with Jim and Patrick, but just on a surface level, do you want to be back here?
Well, I mean, of course you want to be back here, but there's a process you have to go through, right? I haven't really, all year I haven't breathed. I did, during the time off, I was at Four Nations. You're trying to get this team to the playoffs, dealing with all that stuff. So I haven't really thought of myself. I know people don't believe that. It's not, but, sure, at nighttime you think, hey, what am I going to do? You think of those thoughts, but, I do have to take a breath and go through. I think out of respect, both sides, you have to go through the process. You have to. And I understand, I know the next question is, well, how much time do you need? Like, I'm not an idiot. Like, I can't sit on a couch and, it's not, I'll decide when to decide. I mean, obviously there's a time frame, but right now for me, I mean, there's a process I got to go through with Jim and Patrick, and that's really where it's at.
So he says he wants to be back, but it was a qualified answer. There's a process you have to get through. I can understand him having a tip-to-tail season where he didn't feel like he had any chance to sit back and take stock of things. We're going to play a clip here in a second, Irf, about a conversation he does want to have with Patrick and with Jim Rutherford going forward. And as it stands here and now, and I'd love your 2 cents on this, I'm not sure if Tocchet, if it's the Vancouver Canucks specifically that Rick Tocchet doesn't want to coach going forward because of this year or because of what's to come, that if he just wants to take a step back from coaching, period, or if he is 100% committed and does want to come back, just doesn't want to signal that as strongly as he could.
Yeah. I think I believe him in a sense where he does want to take a step back and look at it as a whole and in this season in totality. He mentioned the Four Nations and things like that, but the Canucks made it very clear. If Rick's not coaching here next year, he's not coaching. He's going to have to sit out a year, right, on the option of that contract, unless they grant him.
Well, they've tried to play hardball with him. It would be a rare and unusual step.
Yep. But I think if it gets to the point where Rick and Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford can't see eye to eye on a new contract, and if they Canucks are really going to play hardball, then I don't.
You don't think they'd let him go to Philly if Philly wants him?
I don't think so. I think they let him make him sit out a year, and I don't think Rick would care about sitting out a year. He can go work at TNT if he wanted to.
I mean, we've talked about that in the past. Like Rick is a different coach than others. Yeah. He's got television opportunities. He also comes from a generation of players that made a fair bit of money, right? Like so. A lot of cases, if you're talking about guys who didn't play in the NHL or players from yesteryear, they don't quite have the financial freedom to be able to make those sorts of decisions. I do think, and when he talks about a process, I do think he wants some clarity on how Rutherford and Allvin see this roster and on how Rutherford and Allvin see their work this summer in terms of what they must improve. And he was asked a very specific question about the center ice position, and we have been talking about this since the JT Miller trade in late January. At one point, you had an extraordinary trio of center icemen in Miller, Pettersson, and Horvat. You robbed from that position to fix your defense with Philip Hronek. That turned out very, very well. You still had the top two, even number one centermen, if you want to call them that. And now you're down to one, and Elias Pettersson, of course, did not perform like a number one or even a number two center iceman this year. So here's Tocchet on that critical position for the Vancouver Canucks.
Going forward, what is your recommendation to your bosses in terms of what you guys need to look for this summer in terms of setting your lineup for next year?
Well, you have boxes, right? And you whatever the cap space is and whatever you have in the system, and you try to fill the boxes. Obviously, one of the boxes, listen, you can be competitive, but the center position is vital in the NHL to go anywhere. And that's what we got to strengthen. Now, whether it's through trades, free agency, or drafts, or whatever it is, that's what's got to be done. And, I'm not a GM. And that's what, Patrick's, I have an unreal working relationship with Patrick. I think he's done a hell of a job trying to get me players. Unfortunately, it just, it's tough to, you just can't go off the street and make them, you got to find them. It's going to be tough. Can you do it by committee? Can you do it by really good defense, great goaltending, and manufacture goals? Yeah. But if there's a dynamic guy out there, let us know.
Look, the fact of the matter is that Rick Tocchet's coaching future here in Vancouver, I do think, is going to have to be solved before the second line center or center ice position is solved, Irf. Basically, from what I heard there, I think Tocchet's going to go into this process with Allvin and Rutherford saying, we need another top two center. Now, that he talked about, can we do it by committee? Can we do it by defense and goaltending? That at least gives me the conclusion that he's willing to consider it, doing it different ways.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about like re-sign Pius Suter, sign Jack Roslovic. You've got Suter, you've got Roslovic, you've got Philip Hedl. Can you do it by committee in terms of filling out the middle two center roles? But what did you hear in that answer, and how much do you think that Tocchet's future here pivots on the plan to address center ice this summer?
I think in no way, shape, or form is this team with these group of center icemen as assembled going to be able to compete for a playoff spot. I really don't. I think that you don't know the future of Philip Hedl. He's saying all the right things. He's in the non-contact jersey. He's practicing. But what we know with concussions, it's a scary thing. He's one hit away from maybe possibly having another one. And then you look at Pius Suter. He's talking like a guy that I don't know if he's going to be back. I think he's going to go test free agency and go get your money. And then beyond that, they probably have a spot penciled in for Aatu Ratu, but then are you going to give him the elevated responsibility of, you not only have a spot, but we're going to need you night in and night out to produce, or we're going to keep you in that third line role, which I'll give credit to him, was a very comfortable role for them.
Even third line spot for Ratu, I think, is a big ask next season. We like the development. Some things clicked for the young man, both early in the season. He had the awesome camp, as you recall, started the season with the Vancouver Canucks. Came back and looked terrific towards the end of the season. But if you're slotting him at number 3 center with Bluger as number 4 and your Sasson as number 5, having lost Pius Suter, boy, do you need a heck of a second-line centerman, would be my conclusion there.
Yeah, I think no matter what, you need a second-line centerman. You need a second-line centerman, and you need a scoring winger. They need two in the top 6. And then if you lose Brock Besser, which may have even started talking about him, you may need 3 forwards in that top 6 forward group to even think about sniffing the playoffs.
Yeah, it's why we say this is a hell of a construction project that Rutherford and Allvin have on their hands this summer. I don't necessarily think it is the heaviest lift in terms of trying to get this team back to the playoffs next year. They didn't miss by much. I don't necessarily see a massive drop-off from the group of players that are coming back. In fact, I think you can argue there's a fair bit of improvement that could be expected from the group that is coming back. But, of course, the aim here is not to simply build a playoff team.
No.
The aim here is to build a championship contender. That was the gauntlet that Patrick Allvin dropped before the organization on this day last year. And, again, it was 11 months ago because the appearance in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. I would sure hope we hear that sort of aspirational talk from Allvin again on Monday, even if this season fell well short of where they want to be. I'm going to bring this up. I'm not sure how meaningful it is. I want your 2 cents.
Okay.
But in terms of the player groups they brought up and the way they structured them, if you're not familiar, it's typically 4 players at a time. So once Tocchet was done, they brought up Brock Besser, Quinn Hughes, Thatcher Demco, and Pius Suter. The next player group was Connor Garland, Tyler Myers, Philip Roenick, and Jake DeBrusk. It wasn't until the third player group with Elias Pettersson, Kevin Lankinen, Marcus Patterson, and Kiefer Sherwood. I see some Canucks fans on social media wondering, was that telling? Did that signal anything that Elias wasn't brought up with the other players who wore letters, the other quote-unquote core players, that he was brought up in the third group as opposed to with the recognizable faces of the
No.
Vancouver Canucks.
I don't think so. I don't hold too much stock into that. I think that they just trotted them out as they did whenever they had their meetings, whether they met with the trainers and different people that the players had to meet with. Maybe they had meetings with Patrick Alvin and Jim Rutherford as well, and the way that it all works there down there at the arena in the morning. I don't think that is really any indication of something that's so telling. I mean, he still was going to get answered the questions whether he was in the first group or the last group, so that really didn't matter. So I think that separating the two is exactly what they chose to do, and there's nothing more to that.
Yeah, I'm willing to buy that.
Yeah,
I'm willing to buy that. You don't know the structure, and in some cases it can even revolve around when guys have flights and who needs to go early. So I'm not putting a ton of stock into that either. The answers, however, I thought were reasonably telling. And look, Tocchet at one point said to, I've got to be careful here because of the way you guys take things and run with it. But it's also clear that Tocchet isn't anywhere close to satisfied with Elias Pettersson's habits, practice habits, preparation habits, summer training plan. And the big question, of course, is he going to stick around this summer in Vancouver and begin his summer training under the watchful eye of the club? Elias was asked that today. Here's what he said.
Petey, I know that Patrick, talked about potential off-season training options for you, maybe staying here. I know Rick also said that, some things in your off-season probably need to change. What are your plans for the off-season, and do you believe you need to do something differently?
I got great resources here. Got great resources back home in Sweden. But yeah, I'm gonna stay here for a little bit, just do some extra work before flying home to Sweden.
What do you think?
What's a little bit? Look, that's the $1 million. It's the $92 million question. What is a little bit, Matt? Is it a little bit in a sense where they get him right? He's got an oblique injury, so obviously that's the thing that kept him out. So once he gets healthy from that, is the little bit that is you get into a program that we have designed for you, then you take it to Sweden and continue said program. I think that's what they want.
Yes, and as you outlined, or as you said, Irf, he outlined an oblique injury. He said he was pushing to get back, but it definitely took longer than they expected. They got to a point on the rehabilitation where they just decided, okay, forget about coming back for this season. Let's put all our stock into summer training and summer planning. He was asked a specific question, and I thought a very good question from Ian McIntyre of Sportsnet, who referenced Mark Crawford, and I think there are some similarities between former Canucks head coach Mark Crawford and Rick Tocchet. Bluntly, in some cases brutally honest, intense. And Crawford, once upon a time, said, the Sedin players will be great players once they stop falling down. That leg and core strength was important, and Ian picked up on that theme and put it to Elias. Here's the exchange.
Mark Crawford, a former coach of this team, said that the Sedins, Daniel and Henrik, became great players when they stopped falling down because they had the skill, they had the game, they had the mind. All they had to do was be stronger so they could stay on their feet. Mm-hmm. How important do you think it is to you to get stronger, to get more leg strength?
No, it's that's what I need. Strength doesn't come easy for me. I have to, or everyone trains hard, but didn't get the best genetics from the parents. But no, I know. Obviously, I was dealing with a knee injury last off season that kind of was a little stop in my training last summer, so it was hard to truly train at 100% last summer. But with that being said, I'm just trying to look forward, and sucks when that's playing still, but with that being said, I'm going to take this time to take advantage of the extra month of training to come in ready for next season.
Yeah, and I mean, That was illuminating to a degree. There are, but it's the case with some athletes, right, Irf, that in some cases this does come down to genetics, what you're blessed with, what you're cursed with. And if gaining leg strength, gaining core strength does not come easily to this guy, that's understandable. I actually thought that was one of his better answers here today.
I mean, yes, for sure. It's very difficult to do that, especially if you don't have the genetics. But there was the one summer where he left as a skinny kid, and all of a sudden he came back pretty jacked. So there is that. It's your habits, it's your work ethic, it's what you want to do. And I think that in the beginning of this season, obviously the knee with the tendonitis and all of that, it did slow his season down. But that was one of the reasons. You heard from Rick Tocchet very early on in the season. He wouldn't name the player, but he would call out players for not being ready. And he basically said it, today of what you need to do, how you need to prepare, the things you need to do. You need to be a pro. And for a guy that's making as much money as he is, for a guy that has the weight of the world on his shoulders, for an entire city that wants him to do well, you'd think that, there would be more enthusiasm to want to get better, to take the next step.
And that's what Tocchet was talking about with Elias, saying that he wants to be great. And look, this was a full answer from Tocchet on Elias going forward. Let's listen.
I think people understand, Elias wants to be a great player, right? And we're here to try to help him to become that great player. So obviously there's some things that I got to be careful what I say, because you guys hang on. If I say reprogram, you guys take it to a different level. No, I just think I think he'll tell you this, that his preparation has to get better. There's no secret. If you want to be a great player, you have to prepare, almost an obsessive type of preparation. And I think he got behind the 8 ball early, then the expectations come, and then there's a little bit of struggle with the team, and he could never gain traction, right? He has to, we've talked about that, move his feet, shoot the puck, change angles, and me, I'm an honest guy. He's got to practice better. You have to practice better. And I think those things that he's learning, and do I think he will do those things? I do. I really do. I think I can bank on him taking this information, going away for 4 months, and make sure that he has a plan. And the plan has to change. I'm not sure he can train the same way, or, the team. I don't know who he's trained. I do kind of know, but I don't. To be honest with you, that's got to change.
And look, in discussing Elias's poor season, and I know some people think I've been hard on him, and fair enough. I do think the club and the coach bear some responsibility. Like when Tocchet talks about, I've got to be careful about saying reprogram because you guys take it to a different level. Okay, coach, perhaps you could further educate and clarify what you mean by reprogram. But when he gave that answer to Halford and Brough 6 weeks ago, whenever it was, a lot of people, myself included, said, okay, what are you doing here? This is a majestically talented guy. Let's not turn him into a north-south bang and crash forward because that's your system. You do have to give some license and liberty to offensively gifted players with puck skills, players who, if they aren't forced to play a specific way, are allowed to explore their creativity, find teammates for scoring chances, and deliver on some of their own. That part I do put on Rick Tocchet and the coaching staff. But the other part of that answer, where Rick is talking about improve your preparation, be obsessive about it, make sure you have an off-season plan. Share the off-season plan with us. Club has a right to know. Because, the phrases that came out of Tocchet's mouth this year about discussing Elias and what he has to do better, what he needs to do out there on a day-to-day, game-by-game basis, this was elementary school. this wasn't getting an all-star player to that next tier of being a franchise player and a championship centerpiece. Move your feet, shoot the puck, change angles. Like, those aren't the little subtleties of the game that make a Sidney Crosby or an Alex Ovechkin or a McDavid or a Draisaitl better than your run-of-the-mill all-star. That's the basic stuff. And so that was troubling all season to hear that. And put it this way, if Elias is back next fall, and Tocchet is still talking about preparation, practice habits, summer off-season training, and those sorts of things, if we hear an iota about knee tendonitis, I mean, my God, this has got to be the longest-standing knee tendonitis I've ever come across. If we hear any of that, Irf, then that will be a massive red flag for the organization and its future.
He is entering his 8th year in the NHL.
That's it. Like this is not a 20-year-old. This is a mid-20s, a guy who should be in his absolute prime.
That's the thing. Like, when are you learning? When is enough about practice habits? When is enough about your off-season training? When is enough about those types of things when you're coming up on 10 years in the National Hockey League? I'm not saying this player doesn't have it anymore. He was a 102-point player in his career. He's an 89-point player in a year. He was nearly a 40-goal scorer in the NHL. Like, clearly, there is an elite level of talent there. Yes. It is the point of harnessing that and getting that back out. And I think that whatever management needs to do, whatever coaches need to do, whatever Elias Pettersson needs to do, it all needs to be on the same page. So I agree with you in the sense where some of it has to be on the coaches and management, but it also has to be on the player to communicate everything. Like, there's little to no communication, it seems like. Elias Pettersson probably doesn't obsess about hockey in the summer as much as a guy like Quinn Hughes does. I think that's pretty evident. Maybe he trains in his own way and it's completely different. He's obviously been doing it the same way, and the results have been there, except for this past season because of the knee tendonitis, which obviously hurt him. So I just think that for the sake of the organization, if they can find a common ground, like Rick Tocchet mentioned, we're
going to play that clip here. Yeah.
So Rick Tocchet mentioned, coming to a common ground. If they can do that, that is the start of something. And right now, that is the minimum that that they have to get to.
There was an excellent question asked by Farhan Lalji of TSN to Tocchet about whether Elias is his type of player and whether he can be a championship centerpiece. Let's take a listen.
Only a lot of feeling from the outside that Elias Pettersson might not be a Rick Tocchet type of player.
Yeah.
And you've talked about the areas of growth that you need to see in him to evolve and meet you at the 50-yard line. He's 6 years into his career. He's not necessarily a kid anymore.
Right.
Can you win with Elias Pettersson as a centerpiece?
Yeah, I do, because I think there's something there. I don't know that I just, I balk at he's not my type of player. I've coached all different types. I think today's game, you have to play fast. You got to think fast. All the best players are that. That doesn't mean you have to be a speedster, but I think you have to think that way. And if that's a riff because Petey thinks you got to play the game slow and he doesn't want to move his feet and
more
stuff.
From a character standpoint.
Yeah. Well, character standpoint. Yeah. Oh, he's a great kid. Like, we have a lot of I have a lot of time for him. Whether he's never told me he disagrees with my thought process. I wish he did, because maybe that would help. But he's a shy kid. He's a shy kid, and I think that he's got a letter on his chest. That's for a reason. So I'd like to see him take that role a little bit farther. Now, that I don't think he thinks I'm harsh because of that, but I want him to be a leader in this team and have a voice. But you also have to make sure that you portray that to your teammates and on the ice. And I think he has it in him, and he's going to need some help, and he's going to have to take a deep dive in himself too.
A few things there I want to unpack in terms of playing the game fast or playing the game slow, and Tocchet sort of got at it there before Farhan interjected with talking more about the character. I do wonder if that's just it, Irf.
Yeah.
That Elias wants to play the way the Sedins played the game, the way we've seen other great players. Draisaitl play the game, where it's more of a controlled half-court game and less of a north-south, turn pucks over, see if you can score off the rush. If you can't, dump the puck in, go retrieve it, and play that sort of game. The second part of that answer that completely strikes you he's never disagreed with me, and sometimes I wish he did. Like, to me, that says that Elias and Rick, the trust still isn't there, that they can't have the full 100% candid conversations about the way he's playing, the way Rick wants him to play, the way Elias prefers to play, and whether anything can be done within the Tocchet system to allow him that freedom.
You know what though, Matt? Maybe that's just not who he is.
Yeah,
and I think that's something that they're very
that's becoming
starting
clearer
to realize,
and clearer. Yeah, Irf, that he might just not be the guy, the personality that they need, and I think that was evident in the third part of the answer, where Tocchet talked about, look, he's a shy kid, and he would like to see him take that A and that leadership role a little further, or at least portray that to his teammates. That's something that we have absolutely heard from Quinn Hughes and Tyler Myers and even JT Miller when he was here. A willingness to step into that role and lead teammates through actions and words. And I just get the sense that Elias doesn't ever want that sort of responsibility. And I do wonder what that means in terms of his potential and his ceiling, at least in this organization, with the sorts of things that Rutherford, Alvin, and Tocchet deem important. So I think, Rick, go ahead.
No, I just going to go back to when Quinn Hughes was named captain. Like, there was a small portion of, I think, some sort of fans and maybe even some media that thought that it should be Elias Pettersson, that, he was going to be the guy. And you just knew from watching and the way that he interacted with the media, it just wasn't his thing. Now, I know it's not always to do with the media or being in front of the camera, but as a leader on the team, a National Hockey League team, you're going to be questioned after wins for the great. We're going to praise you, but you also have to accept the criticism when you lose hockey games night in and night out.
And I think that's most difficult for him. I think the pride is strong there, and I think, admitting mistakes, admitting poor play, having to discuss plans and procedures to go forward and improve, I think the pride gets in the way there. I was one who was calling for Elias to wear the C. I'll take the L on that. At the time, I felt like that's the sort of thing you want to give him to make sure he resigns. He did, in fact, resign. But I always go back to Henrik Sedin, Irf. Like, when I first got to Vancouver in 2007, I had guys on the beat tell me, oh, don't ever talk to the Sedins. They have nothing to say and boring and blah, blah, blah. And, are kind of their own entity. Henrik got that C. And it was like the most empowering and liberating process that I'd ever seen with an athlete. Suddenly, he went from this guy who, was in one of the stalls and a pretty good player and had his fair share of media requests, but didn't say a whole lot and certainly didn't speak much on behalf of the team. And, of course, Trevor Linden, Marcus Naslund, you had ex-captains there. But then they give him the C after Roberto. And, Henrik Sedin was the statesman. Henrik Sedin was everything you wanted a leader to be. Pettersson was asked why his speed has decreased and why his shot has faded, and basically gave a non-answer. Said he didn't know. And then at the end, when I think he realized, boy, that answer is not going to go over well, said, definitely something I'll work on this summer. When I talk about the reluctance, when I talk about the stubbornness, again, and about the pride, winning the day over the sorts of things that the Canucks themselves and maybe you as Canucks fans want to hear, to me, that was one of the worst answers. He did, I'll give him credit for this, he talked about how he had a different mindset coming into the season, given the big contract. And then when the points didn't start to come, he started overthinking. He effectively admitted that it got in his head. And he also mentioned the knee and how it hampered his offseason training last season. He got asked a question about Rick Tocchet. It was very muted. It was very formulaic. He was great, good leader, teaching me and everyone else. There were a number of short and non-specific answers. Irf, I felt there was a reluctance to take some responsibility. It didn't sound authentic. There was a little bit of aggrieved that crept back in. So I didn't necessarily find it a convincing performance.
I think we didn't know that Rick was going to speak today. I think that in all reality, no disrespect to anybody else, but the only people that we really wanted to hear from were Rick Tocchet, Quinn Hughes, and Elias Pettersson, and 3 of them all had different messaging about what was going on and where things stand with Elias Pettersson and where things stand kind of with this group moving forward. And I think that right there is telling of the dysfunction this organization has right now, and how much it needs to start at the top with management and then down to the head coach, whoever it may be, into the players to get a path and some sort of pathway to figure out where they're going to be next season come training camp.
As for the noise, as everyone seemed to deem it, Tocchet spoke on this. Mike tells me we've had a little bit of trouble with this audio in particular, so I'll paraphrase. Tocchet was asked about the feud, the dynamic between Miller and Patterson. He talked about how that was a really hard question because he's a big JT Miller fan. It was clear from his opening salvo that he didn't want to say anything negative about JT. He talked about how there was some stuff between the two of them even before he got here. He talked about how, given that it was smoldering, he didn't think it would turn up to the levels that it did. He said, did it get uncomfortable? Yeah. And then talked about how he had lots of meetings. And in fact, Tocchet said he had more meetings this year than he can ever remember having in a hockey season. He also said that he was very much aware of all the public remedies that were offered to the Vancouver Canucks in terms of getting together, sitting it down, hashing it out, lock the door, have a beer, have a meal. And he said, you don't think we tried all that stuff? It just didn't work out. And then he went on, and I thought this was very gracious of him because one player is still in his charge and one player is gone, but he went out and said there's no bad guy here and would still want JT in the lineup because of the way he played for him. I thought Brock Boeser gave a pretty insightful answer on the noise. You'll hear the question here about whether or not anything could be done differently, and Brock took the answer and took it to the noise. Here's Brock.
Look back on the year, obviously we're frustrated. We wanted to make the playoffs, and when you're that close to making the playoffs and you fall short, you look back and you wonder what you could have done differently and how you could have been better for the team. So, I really wish we weren't sitting here right now and we're preparing to play in the playoffs, but we aren't. So, you got to close that book and look forward to the future.
I'm not sure that was the right one, Mike, because, Brock went on to talk about how he wished they had gotten together and quashed the noise. Mike, I might have given you the wrong clip there. Anyways, but he allowed that it seeped into the room. Then Elias was asked about it. Take a listen. You'll remember he tried to deny there was any problem there until late December. Shortly thereafter, the president of hockey operations acknowledged that, this is real. It's not only affected them, it's affecting the rest of the team. Here's how Elias today characterized the feud with Miller.
A lot's been made about what happened earlier in the season with you and JT. How difficult was that to go through, and how much did it affect your play?
It was it's definitely something I don't think neither of us could prepare for, the way it blew up. Just like that was like the focal point, not if we win or loss, it was like between us. Maybe we weren't the best of friends, but we respected each other as teammates. And that's what I want to say.
Well, I kept it short, and I understand that's uncomfortable terrain for Elias. And look, it's now resolved, and it has created other issues, and now it's about whether or not the Vancouver Canucks can solve those other issues. But of course, Elias now has a big hand in doing that. You won the day, kid. Your antagonist is now gone, And so that excuse is also out of the way, much like the winger excuse from last year was out of the way, and hopefully the knee tendonitis is also out of the way so he can have a good, big summer, right, Irf?
Yeah. And
we'll see about the oblique injury. I sure hope we're not hearing about the oblique injury in September either.
No, absolutely. And look, I mean, the Elias Pettersson, JT Miller thing has been going on for years.
Mm-hmm.
It came to a head this season, and the decision was made to trade away JT Miller. Whether you agree with that decision or not, remains to be seen. I still have the mind that the Canucks did try to move Elias Pettersson, and teams were interested in that player, and I think they're going to have to make a really big decision here over the course of the next little while before his as you alluded to earlier, before his no move clause kicks in on July 1st. If they see a pathway where this player is the future of this franchise alongside Quinn Hughes.
Yes.
Quinn Hughes is there. He's your guy, but is your star player, is the guy that is going to take you to the promised land, that you can count on night in and night out, that's going to be the leader on the ice and off the ice, is that guy Elias Pettersson? The biggest question, Matt, I'll ask you and even our listeners, can you win with Elias Pettersson? Do you feel like you can win with Elias Pettersson?
I think the Vancouver Canucks, particularly Rutherford and Tocchet, have always been highly skeptical of that. I'm not sure anything that was said today assuaged those concerns. We'll see what kind of summer he has. But if you're sitting here telling me that Elias Pettersson is traded by July 1st, that would not surprise me in the least. Thatcher Demco was extraordinarily gracious towards Kevin Lankinen. Goaltender relationships are interesting. Sometimes like quarterbacks, sometimes they're thick like thieves. Sometimes it's a more rivalrous situation. I've got to hand it to Demko, at least in terms of what he said all year about Kevin Lankinen, including today. Very much seemed like team player, like he's in this together with his new, I would say understudy, but not quite understudy anymore. Kevin Lankinen's got the new contract. He's a veteran player. He played more games. Thatcher talked about how Lankinen really kept them into the season early on when he was hurt. He also talked about, and we'll discuss this more next week, he also talked about how excited he is for the summer because he knows what's going on with his body now as opposed to last year, and that he thinks that he can really make strides. Talked about the team that he has around him, that he's got a good plan for the summer. Tocchet has also talked about this, that Thatcher is meticulous with his regimen, has it down to sort of the day and the hour in terms of what he works on. He was asked about a contract extension this summer. He's going into the final year of his deal, which means he is eligible for an extension on July 1st. Let's hear from the Canucks goaltender.
Thatcher, later this summer, you're going to be extension eligible. Do you anticipate at some point possibly talking about a new contract with the team, or given everything that happened this year, do you anticipate maybe playing next season out and taking it further down the road?
Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to be a Canuck since day one. I want to be here. Obviously, drafted here, and yeah, I mean, I'd like to get an extension done and stay here. Obviously, that's something that Patrick and my agent will start talking about. But I'll let them focus on that. I'm focused on getting myself back to where I know I can be, and everything will play itself out.
I'm not sure he's getting a contract extension this summer.
Not this summer.
I'm not sure why the Vancouver Canucks would want to go to the table on July 1st and pay him like a Vezina Trophy finalist after this past year. I think much like with Besser last year, I think if you're the Canucks, you want more information on Demko's health and his ability to hold up over the course of next season.
Like Elias Pettersson needs to have a big summer, right?
Yeah.
And there's a reason why they signed Kevin Lankinen.
Yeah. And you do wonder, like, if Thatcher is so dead set on an extension, because I think their plan and their hope and their desire, and I think it's prudent, I think it's the right call, is to bring both of those goaltenders back, be fantastic at that position next year, and help underpin team success, because you're likely going to be a little short on offense depending on how you address the center position, if not the top six wing position as well. But I still think, and Tocchet alluded to this as well when he talked about, can you do it with defense and goaltending? I do think everybody in the organization looks at it and goes, at least we're going to be great at goal prevention. And I think Thatcher Demco and Kevin Lankinen in tandem is a big part of that equation. So if Thatcher absolutely needs the contract extension this summer, I do wonder how that dynamic is going to play out. All right, we got Jeff standing by here. So let me tell you about Honky Tonk Blonde Ale from Yellow Dog, a new release in collaboration with the Casey Clark Show. Honky Tonk Blonde Ale. Bright brew, has a light malt backbone, refreshingly crisp finish. So grab a can, turn up the volume, and let this blonde ale be the soundtrack to your next adventure. One thing we got to get to beyond what was said at Rogers Arena this afternoon, Rick Dhaliwal reporting that on Tom Wielander, talks are going nowhere and there is no communication right now between the club and the advisor on Schedule A bonuses is the hang-up on this. Very odd.
I also think that there's a sense that Wielander doesn't want to play in Abbotsford.
Yeah.
And
I heard you mention that earlier this week.
Yeah,
on,
and I think that that's going to be the case. I think he's going to be a BU, finish his classes, hang out, do his thing, and I think he will turn pro at next year.
You think he's going back for another?
He'll 20. For next season.
Next season.
I think so. I think there's some people at BU that believe that he's not coming back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Whether that's from him saying that to them or whether they just know that. So if that's the case, then the obvious reaction to that is probably turn pro.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what is done and what is said on the Tom Wielander file over the course of the summer. Okay, let's get to today's menu. It's brought to you by Greta. Fantastic spot for all the games, home and away, pregame, postgame, your steps from the arena and stadium district. Of course, they got the great street food menu there, the incredible arcade, weekly drink specials, 50 West Cordova, Greta Bar. Let the games begin. We're going to hook up here with J-Pat live from Rogers Arena in a moment. Irfaan and I are going to discuss the Stanley Cup playoffs and these attractive first-round series a little later in the program, and also the big announcement that's coming next week on women's professional hockey, the PWHL, set to expand to Vancouver. That's all coming up on the program. Now time for our Bet365 bets of the day. I'll give you the tea, sir, since you were so great at Point Grey this week. What do you got on the lineup for this weekend?
I'm taking the two favorites just for the sake of making some money. So you take the Winnipeg Jets at home and you take the Colorado Avalanche on the road. No Jason Robertson for the Dallas Stars. Put those two together. I believe it's plus 168. So you get some pretty good odds for two favorites for game one.
Dallas, a big underdog at home against Colorado in game one. I'm going to take the New Jersey Devils. And I know that's the Ugly Duckling series.
That means you have to watch it.
But I have some concerns about the Carolina Hurricanes this spring. I also think that because nobody expects anything from New Jersey, and of course they got the injuries to Jack Hughes and Dougie Hamilton, but I think they can sort of play stress-free, pressure-free. No one expects anything of them. They're on the road. Let it all hang out. I'm going Jersey in game one at the very least. But also, I like the value there at plus 165. Breaking news coming in from Bet365, where every nail-biting overtime win is a barn burner. Every face-off, hat trick, power play, shot on goal, penalty shot, every suspenseful minute in between. Amazing. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365, an official partner of the NHL. Download the Bet365 app and use code NATION to get in on the game. Must be 19 plus to play. Please play responsibly. Jeff Patterson coming up next. Harrison Price back here from the historic Wall Center. This next interview brought to you by the Arnold Palmer designed Whistler Golf Club. Spring preparations underway. Big, exciting opening day, May 9th and they're accepting online bookings for the entirety of the 2025 season right now. No need to wait. Get those times locked in. If you do have a group of 12 or more and you're planning a 2025 visit, highly suggest you get those times on hold right now. The prime times always fill up quickly at the Whistler Golf Club. Tell them about your group, Whistler Golf Club, whistlergolf.com/groups, and follow on social media at Whistler Golf. As we joined now by RinkWide Vancouver's Jeff Patterson, our Canucks reporter, who took in the proceedings this morning and joins us from Rogers Arena. Jeff, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm not sure what I was expecting to hear, but I don't know that I heard it, quite frankly, from a lot of the people involved. A bit of a curveball with Tocchet coming out of nowhere. We were led to believe that this was going to be Players' Day, and then that the coach and general manager and maybe the president as well would meet with the media at a later date. I will say this, that, and I don't know that the listeners care that much, but man, it's a clunky format. Media members were allowed one question and a follow-up to the head coach, and just one question to each of the players that are sitting there on the podium. So if the player gave you an answer and you wanted to dig in, that was against convention, and there were no follow-ups for individual players. It was a hot potato with the microphone, and you had to pass it on. So, there were a few things.
So was that different than other years, Jeff? Do you think that was designed to...
Well, I think it was designed to get as many questions as possible, but like when Elias Pettersson was at the podium, I certainly had a question that I wanted to ask and just was never able to get a microphone. And then they moved along to the next group. So,
what about Tocchet going today? Our understanding is he's off to Vegas tomorrow for a little bit of R&R. Do you read anything into Tocchet going in advance of the players here today, and not typically with management as he's done in the past?
I'm not sure what to make of that. I mean, Vegas is his off-season home, so I think he is heading home. Whether he comes back to Vancouver to negotiate face-to-face with management and ownership, or whether that's all done via some sort of video conference, we shall see, I suppose. So yeah, and look, I know you guys talked to it about the order in which the players were trotted out. I try not to read too much into that. I will say, though, I think we all go into this final day knowing that there are a handful of players that are in far more demand than others. And so, when Pia Suter, even though, I mean, look, he's one of the big questions facing this group in the offseason, but you run him out there with Quinn Hughes, Brock Besser, and Thatcher Demco, like, it gets awkward when one guy, and it feels like there's always one guy in the foursome that doesn't get the shine, doesn't get the questions. I always feel it's a little awkward in that moment. So I don't know. I wish they could part with convention, and could we not have had 10 minutes with Brock Besser one last time, just on his own? Could we not have had?
Yeah, you wonder if there's a better way to do it in terms of just opening up the room, making everybody available.
Exactly.
And people, exactly. Nevertheless, and just so since gotten a note here, apparently Elias was specifically set aside with a less in-demand group because people knew that there would be a lot of questions for Elias. So let's start there, and let's start with the Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Jeff, what did you hear from Elias today, and do you believe he's going to be able to make the necessary changes that Tocchet and others have described to be the player and the leader that the Canucks are hoping him to be?
Well, I sure hope so. If he's back, they're banking on it. They need it, obviously. And this is a guy that Rookie of the Year and 102 points and an All-Star, all those types of things, but was so far removed from that player this season. And 45 points, as we know, wholly unacceptable in the first year of this new contract. So given the state of flux around the center ice position, if they keep him through July the 1st and his trade protection kicking in, if he's back next year, they need him to be a whole lot better, and he has to know that. And so, there's nothing I can add in terms of what's needed from him here in the offseason. I will say if we call it a performance today, it felt obligatory, as it was for all these guys. I didn't think he went above and beyond. I felt like he was far more candid 6 weeks ago when we had him off the cuff after a practice in the locker room. Now, in fairness, he gave a decent answer to Ian McIntyre, the clip that you played, about needing to get stronger, and even, tried to crack a joke about the gene pool. And, so there were moments in his answers, but I didn't feel, I guess what I wanted to hear was some ownership of this lost season, this season for him individually and for the team as a whole. I didn't really hear any of that from Elias Pettersson, so that was a little disappointing. And had the microphone made its way to me, I wanted to ask him, do you think you've got anything to prove? Like, you've been an all-star, you've been a 102-point guy, but based on this season, like, are you motivated by the doubters and the haters that are out there? And do you think that you've got anything to prove? Because he had done all those other things, the accomplishments, before this contract kicked in. The dynamic is different when you're getting paid what he's getting paid now. And so I didn't get a chance to ask that question. I don't know what kind of answer I would have got, but yeah, I would have just liked to have, it's us in the media that's there asking the questions, but it's being streamed live to the fans. And I guess I would have liked him to have spoken through us to the fan base a little bit more with some sort of assurance that he understands just how far off the rails this season got for him individually and for the team collectively. And I didn't really hear anything there from Elias Pettersson along those lines.
No secret what everyone wants him to do organizationally, Jeff. Rick Tocchet talked about meeting in the middle. He doesn't even know he thinks he knows who he works out with in Sweden. And then they want to be on the same page. And then Rick saying that Quinn Hughes is going to maybe have some guys work out with them this summer. But then Quinn Hughes says that, yeah, I don't know if I can really help a guy like Elias Pettersson. So what do you make of that? And I guess maybe for the sake of this, is it captain just knowing this guy's been a veteran, he's going to enter his 8th year in the NHL, he should know what to do to get ready for next season?
Yeah, that was an interesting answer, certainly from Quinn, who, by the way, just looks and sounds absolutely fried. Like, he did post-game the other night, and even the other night, in the moments after the final game, he said, I'll have more to say in a couple of days, and this was a couple of days, and he had very little more to add. Like, I think he's just been completely shell-shocked by what is hopefully the most difficult season of his career, with the injuries that kept him out of the Four Nations, obviously, but just the way things have gone sideways here. Look, the Hughes family obviously has a good thing going on at their encampment in Michigan, but I don't think they can be expected to bring every struggling NHLer into the fold in the summer. Like, they're a family. They're allowed to have some family time. And so I've heard so many people that have been talking about, like, hey, just send them to the Hughes family for the summer. Like, that's not fair to the Hughes family. Like, these guys are hockey guys. Obviously, they come from a hockey family. They've got a good thing going on there. But I don't think that can necessarily be the cure-all for every issue that ails Elias Pettersson or anybody else. And we didn't get names about which of the teammates ultimately are going to jump on board. I think between what the hockey club has said to Elias and what, just, again, sort of being peppered with questions about it, if he doesn't get that his training is going to be under scrutiny this offseason, then he's never going to get it. And there's just reinforcement, I suppose, with all the questions that came his way in that regard. But look, I thought it was interesting. Rick Tocchet, when he talked about how, Elias has to meet me halfway. I'm not going to go to the 75-yard line. Again, this is another sort of indictment of, like, I'm willing to help, but I need him to help himself here. And that was it was sort of a reluctance. I felt a reluctance from Rick Tocchet to go all the way in fully endorsing him. And he talked about him being a good kid and all those types of things. But why isn't Elias Pettersson standing on the 50-yard line? Why isn't Elias Pettersson going 75% of the way to meet the coach? So, and then again, he's got to prepare better. He has to practice better. We've heard that an awful lot. And Rick Tocchet echoing that. Again, and I'm seeing it in my mentions again today, people talking about the media blowing this whole JT Elias thing out of the proportion. And Rick Tocchet says, did it get uncomfortable? Yeah.
Yes.
Like, how many more?
How many meetings? Yeah. No.
Yeah. And more meetings than ever. So for the doubters out there, like, I guess we're never going to convince them that they're,
Jeff, let's not even try. Let's just stop right now, because even Elias acknowledged it today, and Elias couldn't muster the honesty to acknowledge it in December. I want to play, because I teased it earlier and we missed it during the discussion, but the Quinn Hughes clip when asked about how he can help Elias. Let's take a listen and come back and discuss.
Quinn Brock mentions the noise, and Rick, came in here earlier as well, and we talked about the JTPD situation. I mean, teams go through adversity. That seems to be a difficult, or different at least, type of adversity than the norm. How tough was it for you as the captain of this team to kind of navigate through all of that?
Yeah. I mean, there are some challenging times for sure, but I think, it just comes down to it that, everyone's got to be better, and we need guys that, elevate their game, and that's all it comes down to. So it's not about one guy or Millsy or PD. You look at 82 games, it's, 24 guys on a roster or whatever it is. It's not 2 guys. And, I think everyone should be held accountable, not just, we're going to put it on that for, why we're in this position this year.
That was Quinn on the noise. He was also asked if he had a role in helping PD get better over the summer, and he said no. He basically said, it's everybody's individual responsibility to do that. Okay, Jeff,
which I get. Quinn Hughes is a player, and yes, he's the captain.
Right, he's not a coach. He's
right, and so I get it. But man, did that long pause off the top of that answer?
Well, there were several long pauses from Hughes off the top, and frankly from Elias as well. In some cases, searching for the right words. In other cases, I think those pauses spoke volumes. Just so nobody thinks we're piling on Elias here, did Tocchet hit the appropriate notes for you, Jeff, in terms of taking his responsibility for the failures this year?
It sounded a lot like last year's, where he talked about being open to change, and were there things that he could have done? Could he have been tougher at training camp? I think we have to remember, guys, this team was 14-7-4 at the 25 game mark. Like, what they did in training camp through the adversity, they got off to a 105-point pace a third of the way through the schedule. So it wasn't about getting out of the gates poorly like it was under Bruce Boudreau. It was as things started to go sideways, and I think we all know the reasons there. But the buck stops with the head coach, and interesting to hear that he said he's open to bringing in a new addition to the staff because he didn't think that the part-time thing was working. He didn't name Sergei Gonchar, but Gonchar is the part-timer that flies in and works out, and I think they all respect Sergei Gonchar. But look, the margins are fine in the National Hockey League, and if you can find a piece that you think, or an area that you think you can upgrade, then absolutely, they've got to invest in every possible way. So I'll be curious to see. He went to bat for Yogi Savikoski. He's clearly heard the noise of people lamenting the power play, which, through the struggles of no Elias Pettersson at times, no JT Miller, no Quinn Hughes. Almost all the parts of the first unit power play were missing. It's still produced at a reasonable level, but can it get better? The component parts there, I think, are in place for a power play to be truly dynamic if all of the right people are put in the right spots and they all pull on the rope in the right direction. So, I asked him. I didn't really think he certainly didn't come out and say yes when I asked him point blank if he wants to be here. He then went into the whole thing about needing to negotiate, and I understand that part of it. And I thought interesting, too, that, if Hockey Canada, a year out from the Olympics, wants continuity from the Four Nations to the Olympics, Rick Tocchet was on the Four Nations staff. The other 3 guys are coaching in the playoffs. So, I asked him if his season was over, and he said no. He had been contacted by Hockey Canada, but he didn't think he could give the best version of himself. So he's taken a pass on coaching at the
Warriors. And I thought that was telling too, Jeff, because it was an equivocated answer on if he wants to be back, and he laid out that he wants to have a discussion with Patrick and Jim, and it sounds very much like it's a discussion about the plans at center ice. But, of course, if you go to the Worlds, you're in front of cameras and microphones, and people can ask you what's going on with your future and whatnot. And I do wonder whether he is looking at other pastures and wondering if they're greener right now, specifically Philadelphia, and specifically if he doesn't get the contract offer he wants, nor the answers he wants from Canucks management.
Right, and I wondered, I took that to mean I can't give my best version. Like, if you get hired,
and I don't dispute that. I think there's some sincerity there.
The job starts today in terms of recruiting and watching, who's out of the playoffs already, who's going to be eliminated, all the planning and preparation. If his priority, and it should be to himself to get a new contract, than if he's spending countless hours negotiating with the Vancouver Canucks and talking with his agent and all that kind of stuff. Then he's not 100% all in, and that's fully understandable. So, I think it would have made sense. I think Hockey Canada was right to approach him for the continuity aspect, certainly coming off the success of the Four Nations, but I also get it. And we'll see. I thought it was interesting. Connor Garland was the only guy that, and he emphatically embraced the opportunity yet again to represent the Stars and Stripes and talked about how much he loved his country. Went over to Latvia. He was part of the American team that was eliminated by Artur Shilovs and Latvia a couple of years ago. This one's in Stockholm and Denmark. But boy, Connor Garland sounded really excited to once again get the opportunity to go represent Team USA.
Another guy that wants an extension is the goaltender. So when Thatcher Demco says that, I'd like to extend here in Vancouver, what is your immediate reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating dynamic, right? This is a guy with injury problems. He's going to have this summer to go and train, and that's great. And everybody, I think, wants to believe that with a full summer unencumbered, he can get back to being the guy that he was a year ago, when he was the runner-up to Connor Hellebuck for the Vezina. But injuries are a huge part of the Thatcher Demco story, as we know. So there's in my mind, there's two ways to look at this, guys. He was asked about extending, and he said his agent would talk to Patrick, and that's all well and good. This isn't a season to negotiate off, obviously. I mean, this was a forgettable season for Thatcher Demco. That said, if he comes back and runs into more injury trouble on an expiring contract, what does that do for his negotiating power? Is there a world in which he would take a really short-term, a one-year extension to have a little bit of security somewhere in his back pocket and come back? I mean, he said all the right things about Kevin Lankinen. It's fine to say that in April when they're battling for the net come October and opening night. Can that relationship stay in a healthy place where they're both supportive, or are they going to be battling for that net? Thatcher's never really had to, since he's ascended to the number one rank here, hasn't been challenged. And so I am kind of curious to see how all that goes. But first of all, he's got to stay healthy. And it dawned on me again today as the season comes to an end for the Vancouver Canucks. And we've talked about this core group that, has sort of petered out coming out of the bubble. They were one of the sexy young teams in the National Hockey League. Bo's not here. JT's not here. Pretty good chance Brock Besser's not going to be here anymore. We don't know about Thatcher Demco. Guys, Thatcher Demco will turn 30 in December. He has started 4 Stanley Cup playoff games in his career. And it's a shame. I mean, it speaks to his health, obviously last spring, but also just the state of this franchise for far too long during his time here. But we do a stat that stands out on RinkWide. That's a stat that stands out to me, that a guy who has been a Vezina finalist and a runner-up has started 4 Stanley Cup playoff games by his 30th birthday.
Yeah, and talking with Irf here, Jeff, if he's absolutely heart set on that extension, and I think the Canucks are well within their rights to say, we want to see how you're doing next year health-wise before we go there. I do wonder if that's coming to a trade this summer, because I think the plan, the hope, the desire is to be great in goal with those two guys. But if that's not amenable to Thatcher, if he absolutely wants that extension and there's someone else out there who's willing to give it to him, I do wonder if we've seen the last game from Demko in a Canucks jersey.
Yeah, and it's quite possible. It truly is. So we don't know, and maybe we'll find out a little bit more about the plans. Although I don't imagine that management's going to be terribly forthcoming in terms of their off-season to-do list here. But again, we've talked about needing to look at other areas of surplus if they're going to address the weakness down the middle. I don't know, and I don't know if you have a gut feeling. I don't know what Thatcher Demko's value on the trade market right now would be, the upside is there with a summer of training that this guy could get back and be, a Vezina caliber goaltender for somebody.
Absolutely. The irony here, Jeff, is they have 2 pieces they may trade away for a second line center or for centers, period, this summer who could really come back to haunt them next year. And I, like you, the goaltender trade market is so volatile. It is so fickle. I mean, there are times where goaltenders reap huge returns because the team is desperate and identifies a specific guy to be the solution. And then there are other times where you see damn good goaltenders going on what seems like, dimes on the dollar sort of thing in the offseason goaltender trade market. So not sure where that's going. Don't have a great answer to your question, but I do think on Monday we're going to hear that the plan is to keep both and be great in goal next year. I just wonder if that's going to be a little easier said than done if Demko and his camp absolutely want that extension this summer.
Jeff, what are you expecting to hear Monday? We went into this today not knowing what was going on, and usually, as you mentioned, you don't know what you wanted to hear, but you don't think you got it. What are we expecting to hear from a guy who, in Patrick Allvin, doesn't really say much as it is to begin with?
Yeah, look, and we're guilty. We talk about this for a living, and we talk these days up, right? I think, the year-end exit availability and all that kind of stuff. No management group is going to come in with a whiteboard and lay out their entire plans. It just doesn't work that way. So I'm not expecting that we'll get, a lot in the way of forthcoming answers about how they address their needs, but it's not really an elephant in the room. I think everybody knows that this team needs help down the middle. And so, I guess there'll be questions put about how easy they think it is going to be to address the needs of this hockey club. Obviously, there's going to be questions. I certainly want some clarification from this management group about the Tom Willander situation. We haven't heard a word. There have been reports, but we really haven't heard from the Canucks camp at all. So that is certainly one of the things that I want to hear if Jim Rutherford is at the podium. I'm sure the practice facility, that seems to be a question that will always get put to the president of Hockey Ops, and we'll see if there's any update there. Otherwise, I guess some sort of reassurance that both hands are firmly on the wheel here, because, the question remains, are they any further ahead? This management group's been in place for 3 years now, missed the playoffs when they arrived, and they've missed the playoffs here again, and in the middle, there's been a 109-point season, but are they really, they inherited this incredible spine down the middle at center and have reallocated that to defense? Are they any further ahead in their goal of concocting a contending hockey club? And I think the jury is very much out on that question.
Yep.
Indeed it is. Jeff, thank you for yeoman's work today down at Rogers Arena. Appreciate this. And since I have the two of you together, outstanding work on RinkWide Vancouver this year, gentlemen. Really become a post-game destination and an essential element of following the Vancouver Canucks. Jeff, we'll talk on Monday. Thank you.
Yeah, just really quickly, guys, wanted to say I was happy to hear Philip Hedl in a good headspace.
Yes, good call. Good shout.
Again, who knows how his summer goes, but smile on his face, really did seem to be in a pretty good place, all things considered. Dakota Joshua, I thought, took some ownership of his struggles, and if anybody would deserve a pass, it would be Dakota Joshua, but he seemed pretty invested in the fact that he knows he's got to be a whole lot better there. So a little bit of everything. It was a mixed bag down at the rink, as it was all season long, but appreciate the remarks on RinkWide. A ton of fun, and we just wish that we had playoff games.
Yeah. Next year, RinkWide Vancouver playoff edition. It needs to make a comeback. Thanks, guys. So, Carson Price coming to you from the historic Wall Center, and this next segment brought to you by Bogey Juice. What is Bogey Juice, you ask? Well, Bogey Juice is what you need on the golf course because you'll be making more bogeys than birdies. How did you do it? Were you Point Grey this week?
Yeah, the other day. I would have downed a bottle of Bogey Juice, probably, and some.
What is Bogey Juice? It is vodka sweetened to perfection with simple syrup, crisp apple flavoring, kicking ginger, whether you're tossing it back in a shot or mixing it in a cocktail. Bogey Juice promises a fun, edgy experience. It's going to leave you laughing all the way to the 19th hole, and it is perfect for turning that ordinary golf day into an unforgettable celebration, because sometimes the only bogey you want in your life, not on your scorecard. You can find it at bogeyjuice.com. Irf, I want to shout out our buddy from the Nation Network and the Daily Faceoff, Matt Larkin. He put together a very interesting piece last week looking at Stanley Cup ingredients. Teams that win the Stanley Cup and where they rank across a number of metrics in the National Hockey League. And so here are the 6 elements that he identified for Stanley Cup winners. Number 1, heavy, team weight. You want to be amongst the top 10 heaviest teams in the National Hockey League. Number 2, top 10 scorers in points per game. Not just raw points, but points per game. Minimum 50 games. Number 3, a top 10 goalie in save percentage. I mean, stands to reason, right? Minimum 41 games there, so half the season. If you have a goalie who's in the top 10 in save percentage and played at least half the season, that's another element. Expected goal differential. You want to be top 10 at even strength here. And it's funny because I will never forget being in my apartment, writing previews for the 2011 Stanley Cup Final, looking at all the metrics, the deep dive between the Canucks and the Boston Bruins. And you'll remember that year, Irf, the Canucks were like number 1 in virtually every category across the NHL. And then I stumbled across even strength scoring, and I went, oh, would you look at that? Boston is actually better than Vancouver in even strength scoring. Proved prophetic, sadly. Expected goal differential at even strength. Penalty kill, you want to be in the top 2/3 of the league, so not really a big ask there. And then how about this one? Trade deadline. Acquire at least one player at the trade deadline. That has been another commonality with Stanley Cup champions. And so, after Matt put all of that data, it spit out 4 teams who meet all 6 criteria. The Colorado Avalanche, the Edmonton Oilers, the LA Kings, and the Winnipeg Jets. They went 6 for 6. Dallas, Tampa, Toronto, Vegas, Washington went 5 of 6. And one of the things that Blake and I have always flagged as well on this show is there are occasional outliers, St. Louis, LA, but almost always the Stanley Cup champion comes from the top 10 in the overall league standings, and stands to reason the 9 teams that Larkin identified as having 5 or 6 of the traits of Stanley Cup champion, they're all in the top 10 in the overall league standings.
And the funny thing about the 6 for 6 is the Michelin star, they're all in the Western Conference.
That's right. That's right.
And I do believe it's going to be a Western Conference
team
this year, yeah.
All right, so let's go around the board here.
All right.
We'll start in the West. Do you like Winnipeg and Hellpuck to get over their playoff issues and beat St. Louis?
Yes, but it's not going to be easy.
I agree.
Yep.
Dallas, Colorado. I mean, this is the heavyweight series, and I know a lot of people complain about this playoff format, and they feel like, it's a competitive injustice that you have 2 teams that are that high up the standings by virtue of the fact that they're in the same division, and by virtue of the fact they're in the same division with Winnipeg, the President's Trophy winners this year, that somehow there's an injustice that they're playing in the first round. I hear that. My counter is always, at least we get this series.
Yep.
Right? There's no guarantees you're going to get this series in the second round or down the road. So I delight in the fact that you get to see first round playoff series of this kind of meat and heft. I'm like a lot of people. I don't love the vibe with Dallas going into the postseason. They've lost 7 in a row. A lot of people joking the Canucks broke them with that big comeback. But, several other things I don't like about Dallas. Miro Heiskanen, how available, how healthy is he going to be? Jason Robertson is now
that's
hurt
the big one
for Dallas. Here's the other thing. Colorado's a terrific rush team, all that speed. Casey DeSmith is actually the better goaltender against rush chances than Jake Ottinger. So we'll see if Pete DeBoer has the gumption to have to go to his backup goaltender if that's the case. But I'm on the Stars here.
I'm taking a team with Nathan McKinnon.
I'm on Colorado.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I agree. In the Rantanen Bowl, I'm taking his old team.
Right. That's the other thing. Dropping in a player of that ilk late in a season when he doesn't have a ton of time, not to mention the fact I think you may have some upset Colorado people that Rantanen pushed his salary demands as he did, so much so that he got traded. So we're both on the Stars there. Are you with I know I'm the ABV guy, but if I'm being honest, got to take Vegas over Minnesota.
The Flurry Bowl.
True.
Vegas. And it's 5, I think.
Kings in Edmonton.
I like LA. I like that home
I.
record at LA. I really do. I know Connor McDavid says that they're not limping into the postseason. Everyone's ready to go. Maybe he is, and maybe Leon Draisaitl is, but the rest of that team, I'm not entirely sure.
There's a lot of pressure there on Edmonton, given McDavid's contractual status. I think when you've lost 3 consecutive playoff series to a team, you probably are going to summon a little bit more gumption than your opponent, who is accustomed to beating you in the first round. LA, you got to love the way they played defensive hockey there under Coach Hiller, a British Columbian. So I'm going with the Kings as well. Moving over to the East, Battle of Ontario. Senators have never beaten the Leafs in 4 all-time playoff series. They have lost in every heartbreaking fashion imaginable. Do you see this being the breakthrough for Travis Green, or do you see the Leafs moving on to round 2? Because the Leafs in round 1, never a good bet.
I do think that Travis Green, I'm not entirely sure if he will be, but should be a finalist for Coach of the Year. What he got with that group, I think he should be in consideration. I think the Leafs' top-end talent is going to be too much for that Ottawa team to handle.
Yeah, I heard somebody, I forget who it was, say if you're picking this series, it's Leafs in 6 or less, because if it's going 7, it's Senators.
Well,
the Leafs.
And what's funny? I saw today the Leafs have called up one Ryan Reeves. They worried about Brady running around?
Whoa. Could be spicy. Battle of Florida. This might be the toughest one, the Battle of Florida, in terms of picking a winner.
Yeah.
Those are 2 quality teams, including the defending Stanley Cup champions.
It really depends on Matthew Tkachuk. Like, what level? He's hurt. Like, at what level are you getting him at? And I guess at 75% Tkachuk, he still can be effective, but I'm going Tampa on this one.
Okay. We'll disagree finally.
Okay.
I'm going Florida here. I like the defending Cup champions. I just think they're so made to play playoff hockey. The forwards are fantastic defensively. I think this could be a fun series. Only gets going on Tuesday. They have like a week off.
What are they doing?
We were saying about the schedule, like if you give Tampa and Florida a week off, you should have gone old school. Have them play game 1, game 2 back to back.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a lot of travel in that series.
That's what I mean.
Exactly.
There's no travel.
Washington against the plucky upstart Montreal Canadiens.
I don't think it's going to be as easy as people might seem to think with the Washington Capitals. The Montreal Canadiens, and going into that Bell Center for games 3 and 4, regardless of the outcome of the first 2 games, is going to be bananas.
Correct.
I mean, you've covered playoff series there and been there.
I mean, it is, for my money, the most electric crowd in the National Hockey League. It's a big house, 21,000 people. Hockey means so much in that community. And it's funny because, the modern Montreal Canadiens fan is kind of like the rest of us, where, you get jacked for the first round. There was a time when the first round didn't mean much in Montreal, but these days it's a different story. I'd be worried if I'm Washington about having emotionally. Where's the tank at emotionally after Ovi's record chase? He's your best scorer. Can he muster what it's going to take to play in the Stanley Cup playoffs at his late age? I think this could actually be an upset here, Irf. I mean, Washington had a tremendous regular season, but how often have we seen, particularly in the Eastern Conference, tremendous regular seasons, Boston, Tampa, go down to plucky underdogs in the first round. So I'm going to take the upset here. Give me the Habs.
Wow. I think Washington's going to play some bully ball a little bit. They're bigger, physical.
For sure.
They're going to throw them around a little bit.
Oh, there's a world where Montreal is out of this series early. They give up a lot, the Habs do. They've got some young players going into their first Stanley Cup playoffs. We know how difficult that can be. Take a look no further than Elias Pettersson and Nils Höglander last year, their first real Stanley Cup playoff series. And then lastly, the Ugly Duckling series. Is anyone going to watch Carolina Jersey?
Can they both lose? I mean, I know their fan bases don't want that.
Forward that.
But, like, you know, the New Jersey Devils, only people that really care about the New Jersey Devils are New Jersey Devil fans.
That's
Same
right.
with the Carolina Hurricanes.
That's right.
Not a big draw.
No, small fan. Not exactly national teams.
Yeah, no Jack Hughes. The Carolina lost Rantanen.
Dougie Hamilton, yeah.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. I'm going to go with the Devils on that one.
Yeah, I'm going New Jersey here, too, in part because a lot of people are going Carolina. I just want to be different.
Why not?
Also, you know, Carolina, Rantanen would have been a big addition from an offensive point of view. They have taken a step back going from Natchez to Rantanen to Stankhofen. I still think Carolina is a terrific organization that's going to be competitive, but they've had offensive issues in the past in the Stanley Cup playoffs. This might be a less potent offensive team than we've seen from Carolina. I'm still not wholly convinced on their goaltender, so give me Jersey in that one. But can we agree? First round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, best hockey we see all year?
Yeah, it is. That's why it's the hardest trophy in sports to win. I really believe that. It's always awesome.
Yeah, and you know, the good news is starting tomorrow, you can sit back and you can take it all in as a neutral without the anxiety. We're putting bloom on the rose without the anxiety of having the emotional investment in your team.
Yeah, no, and I think when you look at it from a Canucks fan perspective here in Vancouver, like, who do you cheer for, or do you cheer for anybody?
Yeah, I'm not sure you cheer for anyone.
Yeah.
I think you cheer for good. I think you cheer for good hockey. I know there are some amongst Canucks fans who don't want to be the Canadian team that breaks it, so we'll cheer against some of these Canadian teams. Not to mention, you know, typically you'll have friends, family who are fans of other Canadian teams. You don't want to give them bragging rights, but I absolutely love the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And like the great news, especially this time of year, is, you know, like 4 o'clock comes around, the sun's starting to get a little lower, the temperature starts to go down a little bit. Had a wonderful afternoon, and now it's time to get on in and watch some hockey.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
There's some wild start times, too, for these games.
Yes, there are. And that's the other thing. Some of these multi-overtime games, let's get some of those, please.
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind watching some hockey like deep into it.
Neither would I.
Secure some price from the historic Wall Center and extend your game night with a staycation here in downtown Vancouver at the Wall Center. Call 604-331-1000. Ask for the Secure some price rate. Some blackout dates supply based on availability. This next segment, a presentation of your Pacific Toyota dealers. We are talking about the Toyota BZ4X, the ideal Vancouver car and commuting vehicle, full access to the HOV lanes. Wave to all those suckers stuck in traffic beside you as you go. Buy 100% electric, plug it in overnight at home. You never see a gas station. Spacious legroom for days, packed with the things you love in an SUV, including cargo capacity, fits friends, family, pets, sports equipment, and of course can handle all the terrain from the city to the slopes. And when you choose the BZ4X, you can get up to $6,500 in rebates and incentives. You can finance a 2025 edition right now at 0.99% APR for 36 months. Take a test drive. Get yourself to your local Pacific Toyota dealership today or visit shoptoyota.ca. So big news, buddy.
Yep.
And Peach broke it in the province. The Professional Women's Hockey League is expanding to Vancouver.
Great.
Team is expected to play out of the Pacific Coliseum. There's a big Wednesday press conference here next week. Reportedly going to be joined by Seattle as well, so a regional rival to start things off. And this is very much a function, and we talked about it at the time. Blake went to the game. We had Mike Gillis in here. When you were talking to Mike Gillis, his son Spencer, an agent for women's professional players, about the takeover tour and the response in this community. The PWHL went around to a bunch of neutral sites to see, what the reaction was, what the response would be to a game. It was 19,000 plus here at Rogers Arena. It was the best attended event during the takeover tour. Opened up some league eyes, and so here we are, professional women's hockey in Vancouver. And just so everyone's not involved with the Vancouver Canucks at all, a separate entity. I know you've become accustomed to the model of a men's professional team owning the women's professional team. You see that a lot in the WNBA, but not the case here.
No.
What do you think?
I think it's great. The Coliseum is a perfect venue for it.
I think so.
And, longer seasons, the attendance on the one-offs was great, the 19,000 that they had, but obviously it might dip on random games, but that place should be packed for every single game.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be good.
I would hope they had done the research. We all know that Vancouver is an event town.
Yes.
If you bring a single event here, don't be surprised to see huge, huge numbers. We've seen this with, Raptors preseason games, soccer match, on and on it goes. Yep. But yes, the key will be to delivering that consistent crowd. I agree with you on the Pacific Coliseum. I think it's an inspired choice. So, and this is a league-owned entity, just so everyone knows. The league owns all the teams. So best of luck to everyone here involved with the PWHL, and look forward to what they have to say on Wednesday. Vancouver Canadians win again, 13-5 over Eugene at the Nat. They put up 7 in the 5th, 4 more in the 7th. 4 different hitters registered 2 RBI. It was a season-high output for the Seas, and Canadian pitchers, a season-high as well, 17 strikeouts. A good prospect, Jaron Watts-Brown, is on the mound for a Good Friday nooner. Struck out 10 in his playoff start last year. 1 p.m. start Saturday, Sunday through the Easter weekend. Then the Seas are off on the road. Make sure you get your tickets, and early. Plan ahead. We always say when the weather gets nice, plan ahead if you're going to a Seas game, because it does become a tough ticket. 604-872-5232 or CanadiansBaseball.com. The Caps are in St. Louis tomorrow, looking to build on an MLS best 6-1-1 record. They've got cushion. They can lose this match and still be in first place of the West.
Yeah, but don't lose. Keep the foot on the pedal.
Absolutely.
The Whitecaps are building something very special for those that aren't paying attention or just not really into sports because they're so done with the Canucks.
Yeah.
Go to a Whitecaps match. Don't just go to the one that you think against Miami that's coming up. But also, did you see, it was during the broadcast, I believe, of the Champions League game, David Beckham had an interview on the CBS panel, and he basically talked about, Arsenal being a big team, and then talking about how we have a match against a very likely big team like the Vancouver Whitecaps.
Wow.
Coming up.
From the mouth of Bex.
Yeah. Obviously owns Inter Miami.
Here's the thing. It's not just that they're winning. This is a totally different style that you're accustomed to with the Whitecaps.
Yeah.
They are on the ball. They are pushing forward. They are completing tons of passes. Like Blake and I joke, it's kind of like tiki-taka North American football to a degree. They're pushing forward. They get shots. They get chances. They have been an incredibly entertaining watch this season. And, we'll hear a lot about Big Summer today, and Big Summer when the Canucks management meets the media. A lot of these Whitecaps had big winters, Irf.
Yeah.
And it was not exactly a long winter in NMLS. I mean, you're only off for a couple of months. So many of these players have come back and just quite clearly have worked on their craft and improved. It's been awesome to watch. Sebastian Berhalter comes to mind. I mean, he's become a starting player. He was kind of a spare part in previous seasons, become a starting player and an important player for them. Vitae, he's getting all sorts of international interest. He's been sensational, and the additions have helped as well. Caps were deciding yesterday whether Sam Adekugbe and Jaden Nelson are going to make this trip. We know Matias Laborda is out, and there's bad news on the working class MVP, Ryan Gauld. Jesper Sorensen, quote, "It's very difficult for me to say when he'll be back. We had hoped that he'd turn the corner with the knee, but he hasn't. We have to see. I think it's very difficult for us to give a good answer. It's more about what he feels than what we can see and diagnosed, so he'll need some more time as well. Of course, Caps here at home next week to David Beckham's Inter Miami, and we certainly hope Lionel Messi as well. Staying with soccer, Canadian men's national team head coach Jesse Marsh is going to miss the first 2 games of the CONCACAF Gold Cup in June, a 2-match suspension handed down for his conduct with match officials during Canada's win over the United States in the Nations League third-place game, and delaying the match by not leaving the pitch in a timely manner. So he's going to miss the game here in Vancouver. They play, Canada plays Honduras to kick off the Gold Cup at BC Place June 17th here, and then the Curacao match June 21st in Houston. He will return for the final round-robin match and hopefully into the knockout phase after that. But Jesse Marsh getting on the wrong side of CONCACAF.
Yeah, but you know what? I
got some fire. I like Marsh.
I don't mind it at all because you're going to bat for your team. And he was quoted in The Athletic, "If I had to do it again, I would." And, you know, as a player, you know, as someone in the higher ups in the executive position at the Canadian Soccer Association, you want someone that fire. You want someone with that passion who has its team's back, especially when we know what we know about CONCACAF and the way things can go.
Exactly. You need someone who's not only a leader and a statesman, and I think Jesse Marsh has been both of those things for Canada, but somebody who's got enough fire that he's going to let these officials know, because, of course, this is the corruption sport. You're not going to push our side around.
Yep.
I've been very impressed with Jesse Marsh, and I sure hope to see this continuation of the Canadian men's team moving up the FIFA World Rankings and into a better place in global soccer. Hockey, there's no question about where we rank there, and the Canadian women's national team destroyed Japan 9-1 in the quarterfinals of the Women's World Championships in Czechia. I want to say Czech Republic, but they prefer Czechia now. They play Finland tomorrow in the semis, and of course the likely gold medal showdown coming with the United States, who plays the host Czechs in the other semi. Poll question results, Surrey Mitsubishi poll question results from Thursday. We asked them, what should the Canucks' top off-season priority be? Extend Tocchet, acquire a second-line center, add character, leadership, or other? What do you think the people said?
The people said center, for sure.
Indeed.
That's the only right answer, I think.
68% said center, 21% viewed Tocchet as the priority, 7% said character leadership, 4% went off the board with their own replies. We'll get to a few of them here. Colin in planning voted add character and leadership. That may embody a top 2 center and the coach. The biggest flaw this season was the lack of leadership to deal with the drama on and off the ice. They have to get control of their own house. Graham, I said extend talk because he would be a huge piece in keeping Hughes. Keeping Hughes is this team's number 1 priority. Everything else is secondary. Chuck voted other. What they need is a coherent plan rather than a whack-a-mole stopgap measures. Frank, how about some team toughness up front? Saw some liberties taken on Quinn this year. Body checks are good, but instilling some fear in the opposition. And then KB spoke for many when he or she said, all of the above.
It's funny, the team toughness thing. I get it. There's a difference of being having team toughness and being tough to play against. Right now, the Canucks have neither, Matt. And I think that's an important thing that they need to address. But the person about the plan nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. Because from a management perspective, you don't only need to have a plan with your current head coach and your current players, but in order to acquire free agents, what is the direction of this team? Who are the pieces you're trying to bring in, and what are you trying to do? And I think that is a hugely important task that they need to overcome this year.
Yeah. As for errors and omissions, well, I've done it again. I have a scribble. It says Saturday. I'm not sure what it relates to 24 hours later. There was apparently an error to do with the day of the week. So yet again, another error within the body of errors and omissions. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time and connecting with the program. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on social. That's X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, live on many of those platforms, noon Pacific time weekdays. And, of course, support the sponsors we keep telling you about. Thank you for this, my friend. Great working with you again.
Absolutely.
Fantastic year on RinkWide for you and Jeff. He'll be back as well as the rest of us next week. Keep it local.